All you beautiful people out there in the interwebs, welcome to my channel, Unlettered and Ordinary. I am your host, Derek Trotter. And today we are going to be talking about a very controversial subject, and that is biblical cosmology, right? Is the earth a globe, or is it flat, topographical plane? So what did the Bible writers teach? What did they write and record for us? Yeah, hold on to your hats and glasses, because this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness. Let's get into this. This is going to be fun. I think this is going to be real fun. This gentleman right here is Greg Stafford. He is an apologist. He was a Jehovah's Witness back in the 90s, early 2000s. I can't remember when he left the Watchtower. But it's been a minute. It's been a while. And he has, he's a very intelligent, very well read, researched, biblical scholar. And I agree with probably 95% of, what he believes. I mean, we were both, Jehovah's Witnesses for a long time. I'm currently inactive. I'm not sure exactly what his status is. But he has, he has three basic pillars on which his group, Christian Witnesses of Jah, try to live up to. Okay, and it's I can't disagree with him. I find it fine. I think people have overcomplicated Christianity and made it so rule oriented, legalistic, I guess is a term that gets thrown around a lot. But I can't argue with these three pillars that he has. One is belief in one God the Father, 1 Corinthians 8:6, and the one Lord Jesus Christ, again, 1 Corinthians 8:6. It's the earliest creed that we as Christians have, and if you're not in line with it, then you don't really have a history in Christianity. Your history is something different. Okay, and then the third one would be the golden rule, to treat others the way that you would like to be treated. It's on that third one that I don't know. I think he might be falling short in regards to how he treats people that differ and have differences of opinion on what constitutes biblical cosmology. But in this video, you'll get a taste of what I mean. In this video, he's specifically talking about, does the Bible teach creation ex nihilo, meaning did God create out of nothing? And obviously that's stupid because, 1 Corinthians 8:6, it says out of God came all things, essentially, right? And God's not nothing. So he's everything. He's definitely something, right? He's God. So creation came out of him, not out of nothing. But he makes a comment about flat earthers, right? And it's interesting because I'm sure he's aware that those that wrote the Bible believed that the earth was flat. At least I hope he agrees to that at least the Bible writers were all flat earthers. I'm going to show you a couple videos from several different biblical scholars, Dr. James Tabor and Dr. Michael Heiser, that will tell you that is exactly what they believed, and they'll show you the diagrams and explain exactly what the belief was. And pretty much every major civilization that's ever existed on the face of this earth has believed that the earth was flat. It's only until recently, maybe 1500s, that the idea of the heliocentric model began to gain popularity, and then it is what it is today. Pretty much every single person that is born has been born since probably the late 1930s has been taught that the earth is a spinning ball with at least seven different vectors, simultaneous vectors, mind you, revolving around the sun. So it's spinning at over 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. It's orbiting the sun at 66.6 thousand miles. That's a convenient number there, right? The sun, and it's corkscrewing following the sun at, what is it, like almost 500,000? So the sun is shooting through the solar system, and the earth is like corkscrewing around it at almost 500,000. Meanwhile, the Milky Way galaxy is shooting off and expanding throughout the universe at like 2.2 million miles per hour. So, plus all the different wobbles that the earth supposedly has. So you've got all this motion, all this motion, right? And nobody feels a thing. And we see the same stars year after year, day after day, right? You can look up at the sky November 8th, 2024, come back November 8th, 2025, and the stars are essentially in the same spot, right? You've got Polaris that just really never moves, essentially. It's just there, and all the stars, if you ever looked at time-lapse photography, you can see how the stars basically rotate in concentric circles around Polaris. Well, if you're taking in all these different vectors of motion, there's no way, Jose, that you are going to be able to see the same stars year after year, decade after decade, century after century, millennia after millennia. The zodiac is going to change, right? You know, those constellations are going to change. It's like saying I can drive from LA all the way up to San Francisco and expect to see the same scenery mile after mile. It's idiotic. It's just stupid, right? But people don't think about it, right? Because you've been like I was. I mean, when my wife first talked to me about the flat earth, I was like, what? Why are you even bringing this up? It was during the time of the scamdemic, and I'm like, it's just a psyop, Nick. It's just people want to associate anti-vaxxers with flat earthers to make them look stupid, even though they've done their research and they know they're toxic and all this kind of nonsense. So I'm not going to look into that. It's not flat. It's round. We're rotating around the sun. That's how we get night and day, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So that's every single one of us since the 1930s, at least. Yes, there are people that, who grew up in the 1930s, who went to school and were taught the earth was flat at school. Yes, that exists. So this idea that everyone has believed that the earth is a spinning ball since, the times of the Greeks is no. That's not accurate at all. But anyways, we can get to the clip, and he brings up flight plans. on a flat Earth, right? Give me a flight plan, otherwise shut up. Oh, how about that's not how this works, Gregor? You're making, because falsification is independent of replacement. You should know this, right? You're making a very positive claim that the Earth is a ball, a globe, with a radius value of 3959. Which, how did we get that, Greg? Because we've only dug, like 8 miles down? How did we know that it's 3959 exactly? But that's besides the point. You have this ball with a radius of 3959, and which means mathematically speaking that at any point on that ball, it is sloping down and away from an observer at a rate of 8 inches per mile squared. Now that is testable, and flat earthers, flurfs, have been testing that over and over and over and over and over again with long distance photography and videography. We have laser tests. We have mirror flash tests over large bodies of water, some like 28 miles. Camera, laser about 6 inches to 12 inches above the surface of the water. They just did one over there in Salton Sea. All right, I think it was 28 miles out in Salton Sea. There's no curvature. There's no convexity to that water. So falsification is independent of replacement. So if I give you proof that this so-called curvature of 8 inches per mile square is false, I do not have to produce to you anything else. Nothing. It's like, for example, and I credit Austin over at Wits It Gets It for this analogy. It's a pretty good analogy. If I told you that all this years I thought my parents were actually my biological parents, and it turns out I find these adoption papers that says that they adopted me when I was just a baby, and I present these adoption papers to you and say, hey, look, these people are not my real parents. And you turn around and you tell me, well, everyone knows their own parent. Everyone knows that these are your parents, your biological parents. We all know this. The whole community knows this. What, are they all in on the conspiracy? It's like, no, this is just, I didn't know either. Right? But here's the papers. Here's the adoption papers. There's my name on it, my parents' signature. I'm adopted. And you turn around and you insist, well, unless you produce your real parents, your biological parents, then I'm not going to believe that you're adopted. Yeah, it's ridiculous, right? It's absurd. So no, I don't have to present you a flight plan. All I have to do is show you that the Earth is not curving at that particular rate of 8 inches per mile squared. But just think about flight for a minute, right? Think about the process of flying over a flat plane as opposed to flying over a curved surface that is dipping exponentially farther and farther away from you in every direction, right? And what that would look like and what that would feel like having to compensate, either A, not having to compensate for curvature, or B, having to compensate for curvature. I liken it to driving around a roundabout, right? Globetards will tell you that you should be able to fly around you should be able to drive around a roundabout without turning your wheel. Normal people who understand common sense will say, no, you're going to drive off and crash. That's not going to work. You're going to have to consistently keep your wheel turned to compensate for the curve in the road. Now just flip that 90 degrees and you get the problem with trying to fly over a curved surface but never compensating for that curve. what's going to happen. We're going to get into that. We're going to show you exactly what would happen. Then we're going to show you exactly, based on the pitch data of an emergency landing over a span of 1,000 miles, did the plane have to pitch down in order to compensate for the Earth? Well, we're going to find out. But first of all, I think it'd be interesting just to see what Greg is saying and just how much he opposes this flat Earth thing. And the fact that he's banned me from commenting, he's banned me from commenting on his channel because I dared ask him a few questions about the flat Earth and about some of the evidences for the flat Earth. But let's get into what he says here.
Maccabees 7:28. They don't teach creation ex nihilo. And if they do, they contradict the Bible, not on that point, but on how it says that man was made, which we're going to get to. It's so stupid, everybody. It does upset me because we have these people who don't use evidence. They come up with a dumb, ridiculous idea that contradicts the Bible or is related to a cursed Bible like the King James, removes God's name, adds to Revelation. Are you crazy? You have that Bible in your hands, quoting it authoritatively? How about no? No, how about we'll use the name of the God of the Bible and not add to Revelation so we're not cursed and come up with stupidity like creation ex nihilo or flat Earth. If you believe in flat Earth, I don't care who you are. You come to me with your belief, again, anybody, and you don't have a flight plan that you're ready to go up and demonstrate, I'm not going to even talk to you. You're a coward. You're pathetic.
I can still hit a book.
Okay, well, there you go. According to Greg Stafford, you're a coward and you're pathetic if you don't have a flight plan. Well, who's going to have a flight plan for a flat Earth when everyone's indoctrinated into believing the globe? Okay, so you're almost asking for the impossible at that point. But if what you're trying to say is it's not possible for a plane to fly over a flat plane, a flat surface, why don't you just go take a drone, Gregor? Why don't you go take your drone, Gregor, to a football field, right? Place it on the end zone, fly it up in the air, and then see if you can fly it down to the other end zone. You think you're going to have a problem doing that, Gregor? No, sirree, bab. So flight over a flat plane is obviously possible. It's just a matter of whether or not your maps line up. And this idea of flat Earth has been suppressed so long, we don't have those things, right? I mean, we do have the Gleason's map, and it is admitted, and it's got a scale, it's got mileage scale on it. So it does pretend to be or does claim to be a valid map to scale. And when you look at the flight plans on a flat Earth map as opposed to a globe Earth map, they're all relatively about the same. And in some cases, they make more sense on a flat Earth. But let's look at this clip here, because this is a video that I commented on Greg's channel, his CW JawTube channel, and let's just listen to a little bit of what he's saying here.
It's not flat. And I've talked about this before in terms of an experiment we could conduct where we have different individuals awake at the same time, but who call each other on cell phones as the sun appears in their time zone. And as it disappears, and then the people to whom it appears in another time zone, they then confirm the daylight and the time zone. And then you could do that going all the way around the Earth to show that the Earth is rotating and that the sun is shining on different parts of the Earth as it rotates. You wouldn't have that kind of time zone change with the sun rising and setting if the earth was flat. The sun would simply rise up into the height of its position and shine down upon the flat earth.
Okay. No. I commented on this here. You can see it's all about fuzzy. That's my other YouTube channel. I post my music and music videos on this one. But notice what I said. I said this whole argument, this phone call argument, is a straw man because it doesn't address the real way in which the sun travels in a circuit or a circle above the earth, just as Psalms 19 verse 6 clearly says. Notice what it says, Psalm 19:6, the sun, speaking about the sun, emerges from one end of the heavens and it circles to the other end, and nothing is concealed from its heat. The sun is local. There are plenty of videos showing sun traveling not only horizontally, but vertically through clouds. Yes, through clouds, with clouds above and behind the sun. Last time I checked, there are no clouds in space. Okay, so here you can see the sun going up into the clouds above it, creating a hot spot underneath the clouds. So he's pulling back. That's CGI, huh? Right? That's totally CGI, right? I mean, so obvious, right? This music is just terrible. Let me just turn it down a little bit. See it going up into the clouds. Now you'll see in a little bit he shows you what the other camera was recording. Now let's look at it from the other camera. See? It's just sitting there in the clouds. It's just like hugging it. Right? It's just like hugging that thing, and it's just lifting, coming out. Creating a hot spot above the clouds. Hot spot beneath the clouds. Right. You can see that these clouds here are clearly behind. Right? And now it's traveling upwards. Sun is moving upwards, coming out of this cloud and entering the cloud above it. See that hot spot? That's not possible. That is not possible if the sun is 93 million miles away. That is a local light source. The Bible is right. The sun is traveling above our heads, above the earth, and it's a local light within the dome, within the firmament. See that? Moving up out of the cloud into the cloud that's above it, and now being blocked by that cloud. But still, you have all this enveloping it, right? Obviously, those clouds are thick enough to block the light, right? So let's look at some more. Sun here, obviously, and we can see the clouds. These clouds are dark because they're being backlit. The sun is behind them. These clouds over here, though, these are being front lit because the clouds are behind the sun. And you can clearly see that the sun is just completely shielding and hiding these clouds, right? And as it moves horizontally this way from right to left on the screen, you'll see when it hits this cloud here, which is dark, that it and these clouds over here, it completely obfuscates the sun because they are, in fact, in front of the sun. But these clouds here, which appear to be equally as thick, if not thicker, right? They are not obscuring the sun when the sun is passing in front of them, right? Which clearly tells you that these clouds are being front lit. These clouds here are being backlit, which means the sun is in amongst the clouds. I mean, that's what it looks like, right? And that's what it has to be. Let's just watch. Look at that. These clouds here look about the same thickness as these, but these are not blocking the sun. Right? Now it's approaching these dark clouds. Oh, now you see that yellow bit there? It's obscuring. This cloud's totally obscuring, but this one isn't. This one is not blocking the sun. This one's totally blocking the sun. It's not that the sun is so bright that it just flashes and shines right through the clouds. No. That's not it at all. These are all about roughly the same density, right? Look at that. This one's clearly blocking. These definitely are not blocking. They're definitely behind the sun. Look at that. Beautiful. We even have clouds from high altitude balloons where it clearly shows that the sun is creating a hot spot on the clouds below at this time. Okay, well, if the sun is 93 million miles away, it's not creating a hot spot. But you're just going to have equal amount of sunlight shining down on all, every section of the earth. You're not going to have a hot spot. Hot spots come from a local light. A local light source creates hot spots. So no, he obviously has blocked me because I can't comment on his channel any longer. But then I also gave him a flat earth proof, right? Railguns. Anybody hear of railguns? No. Well, let's see. Also, if the earth has a curvature like they say, then how can railguns shoot dumb projectiles, hit targets 100 miles away if they can't see them since it's supposedly blocked by over 5,100 feet of curvature? Yeah. You guys ever hear of a railgun? No. It was developed by the Navy. They were to put it on ships. But they would shoot them from the shore, and they would hit targets 100 miles away. Now, if you take a look at an Earth curve calculator, you're going to see that 100 miles at 8 inches per mile squared, because that's how they figure out the curve of the Earth. So it's 8 inches per mile squared. So exponentially, the drop gets greater and greater. Okay, so at 100 miles, it's over 5,100 feet, so almost a mile full of curvature. You're shooting a dumb projectile at a target 100 miles around. You have to have line of sight. These things are not smart weapons. These are just line of sight, dumb projectiles. So it would be the equivalent. This is just how stupid this is, right? It would be the equivalent of setting up a Coke can at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, hiking back up to the rim, driving about a mile back, setting up your rifle, and then expecting that you could actually see the Coke can at the bottom of the ravine of the canyon, and 2, thinking that you can shoot a bullet and it's going to just magically follow the contour of the canyon and hit your target. This is the level of stupidity that we've all been indoctrinated with to believe that this kind of stuff is possible, right? Because nobody wants to be called a flat earther. Oh, you're a flat earther? You're an idiot. You're stupid. No. You're a globetard because you don't examine evidence. And you can't even respond to my question? Okay. All right. Sure. Yeah. It's the flat earthers that are cowards. You sure about that? No. I know you're good. If you even dare to respond to this, you'll probably just clip it there and say the opposite. But anyways, what does the Bible actually teach, right? What does the Bible actually teach about cosmology, right? About how our earth was created and what it is. What is this realm that we live in? So I asked him about the example in Joshua, where Joshua was praying for the sun to stand still. So what did it say? I said, I would also like to know if there's a way to determine, based on the Hebrew or the Greek Septuagint, whether or not the sun and moon were the things actively standing still in Joshua's day. The text specifically says the sun and moon stood still, which implies they were the things moving. It's like if I said the car came to a screeching halt, no one would then assume that the road stopped moving. So the problem for heliocentrists, people that worship the sun god Helios, because that's essentially what you're doing. You're throwing in philosophy into the Bible. You're throwing in the Copernican principle, which specifically states that the earth cannot hold a privileged position in the cosmos. You are following philosophies of men and introducing them into the Bible, right? And you're anachronistically applying heliocentrism to this text in Joshua, which clearly says the sun stood still. It didn't say the earth stood still, did it? No, it said the sun stood still and the moon stopped, which is exactly what Psalm says, that the sun travels in a circuit or a circle. It's actually concentric circles. That's how it works. Concentric circles around the earth, above it, right? The earth is stationary. It's firm and immovable. Did you forget about that verse? It's firm and immovable. Bible says it's immovable. Heliocentrism says it has at least 7 different vectors that it's traveling in consecutively, simultaneously. And we don't feel a thing. We don't feel a thing, which is really idiotic if you think about it. I mean, you can watch videos. This just shows how misinformed people are and ignorant people are. I'm not calling Greg stupid. Greg is not stupid. Greg, you're not stupid. You're highly intelligent. And dude, I appreciate all the hard work that you have done in exposing Trinitarianism. Bar none, I mean, apart from maybe like Rolf Ferrulli, bar none, I think you are probably the top apologist when it comes to, for lack of a better term, we as semi-Arians, So, dude, I appreciate that. Okay, I really do. I watch your videos all the time. I love your stuff. I think you maybe have to chill out a little bit on the spicy metaphors you're using. I mean, I understand the spiritual sodomy thing with Trinitarians, because they are basically, sodomizing the Bible and raping the Bible in a sense, right? In the spiritual sense. But maybe not be so graphic. I would love to share some of these videos with people, but there's no way, dude. There's no way I'm going to send them some of this stuff. Because it's just, oh man, it's over the top. It's too graphic. I mean, you can do what you want. Obviously, you're a free moral agent. I just think that we're trying to become all things to all people, right? So when we're trying to present the truth about the Bible and about Jesus and about his God and Father, to use some of the language that you do is going to be off-putting to the more conservative people. I'm typically more liberal, I guess, than most. But I would. It's hard. It's hard because I do get it, and I do think it's funny, but I can't share that stuff with some people, and that's regrettable, because you've got good information in there. I mean, you're ripping I feel sick. I can't. Sam the Shamunian cult leader, you're ripping him a new one, right? You're tearing him apart. Now you got this William dude who's obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. You destroyed Kelly Powers, which I've had my own run-ins with Sam and with Kelly. If you've watched any of my videos, which I doubt you have, but I've had my run-ins with them, and yeah, they're cowards and they run. And Sam's greatest weapons are red herrings, ad homs, and what else does he like to do? Just ignoring you, just not answering your question, just completely ignoring you, changing the subject. So this is tough. I've debated whether or not I wanted to even do this video and confront you on this kind of stuff, but you just keep on going at it and saying that flat earthers, they don't accept evidence. I think that's a bit of projection, my man. Because I'm going to present you. Well, you couldn't even answer my question about Joshua and the sun standing still and the verb. Was it the sun standing still and the moon that stopped, or was it the earth? That's obviously I've done my own research and I realized that yes, the verb does apply to the sun. The sun did stand still and the moon did stop. And because they were the things that were moving, not the earth. And Psalm 19, I think, confirms it, right? Psalm 19, verse 6 confirms that the sun does travel on a circuit above the earth. Circle, yes. So that's confirmed. Thanks for not answering. It just forced me to do the research myself. But yeah, and you had no answer for the railgun, right? Because there is no answer. It's a line of sight. Yeah? I'm in the middle of something.
Oh, okay.
Call you back.
Bye.
Okay. Sorry. That was my wife. And you can blame her for my flat earthism, my flurfism. She's the one that sent me down that rabbit hole. But I'm glad she did. So let's see. Did the Israelites really believe that the earth was flat? Like I said, we have two different Bible scholars with two entirely different worldviews, I believe. And neither is a flat earther. They're both heliocentrists. But they'll both tell you that this is exactly what was believed and taught by the Bible writers. All of them. All of them believe this. So if they all believed it, why did they believe it? Well, they believed it because based on the information that was revealed to them by God in the Bible. So if God revealed this to them, was he lying to them? Did they misinterpret it, even though it's not that complicated to understand? The sun stood still because it's the thing that was moving according to Psalm. Okay, let's just verify that that's the case. So this is James Tabor, and he does a brilliant job describing the afterlife, or what death, how the Israelites viewed death in the Hebrew scriptures. And he just nails it. Like, he understands that the soul dies and that it's unconscious and that it returns to the dust. He even brings up Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Like, how many people actually understand how damning Ecclesiastes chapter 3 is to this idea that the soul is immortal and it lives on in Sheol, or in the land of the dead, or in whatever other place, right? It clearly shows that animals and humans die the same. They all have the same spirit and they all go to the same place. But I was just really impressed with that. But at the beginning, he talks about Hebrew cosmology. So watch this.
With some slides. And let me just kind of clear everything where I can see what you're seeing. This is a PDF so that I can stretch it and go in and out and so forth. So first, cosmogony and cosmology. Cosmology, I think people are more familiar with, is the idea of the structure of the world, let's just call it, or the universe. In the ancient Hebrews, they see the stars and the sun and the moon as above them, but essentially the earth is the place to be. The earth is the world. So it's not really the idea of a universe in terms of solar systems and galaxies, of course, which they knew nothing about, but thought of as stars above from their human point of view, which is true throughout the ancient world. So cosmology is, how is that set up? And throughout the ancient Near East, the Hebrew Bible comes from the ancient Near East, and even into the Greek world, when we do Homer and move on down to Plato, you'll see it's essentially the same kind of structure in terms of the cosmos, with different tales of creation and how things came to be. Cosmogony is essentially the cause of it, the genesis of it. How did it all get started? What's behind it? So that's typically dealing with the idea of the gods or God somehow creating or bringing about the world. Here's a nice little schematic of ancient Hebrew cosmology. It's pretty different from ours. I think you can see my cursor here. Basically, the Earth is a flat disk. It's got waters on it, lakes and rivers and oceans and so forth. But the major oceans and water are all around it. They're seen as sort of like the edge of the earth. Like if you sailed off to the edge of the ocean, you would presumably drop off. So it is a flat disk. And above are the floodgates of what's called the firmament in English. And there are waters above that. And then there are different kinds of gates that can open. And when these gates open, you have floods coming down and rain coming down. This is particularly evident in Genesis 6, when you have the story of Noah and the great flood. And then you have the sky. So in Genesis 1, the creation of the earth and the sky is essentially the flat disk, ordering that, and then the sky. The sun, the moon, the stars are all under the dome. This is very visual. If you go out on a dark night away from city lights, which is hard to do today, you can look up and you can see this visually. You don't have to experiment or guess about it. There's the dome of heaven very clearly, and you see the stars and sometimes the moon, and then in the morning you begin to see the sun coming over and lighting everything up. And above that is the firmament. And then this is the world, the earth, or the land, really, as it's called in the Hebrew Bible. And then Sheol, which is below the earth. It's the world of the dead. And then there are columns that the earth rests upon. And then you have this endless question of, well, what are the columns resting on and so forth? And you know about the infinite number of turtles and all of that in some of the mythology. But anyway, one of the things to notice here is heaven is the dwelling of God and the angels. This is ancient Hebrew, or the Old Testament. I'm going to call it the Hebrew Bible. Here's another view that's pretty similar. You can see here you've got God, the heaven of heavens. So there's the heaven and then the heaven of heavens, waters above the firmament. This is drawn just a little bit differently, and it's got some explanations here that I won't read, but you can watch this and stop the video if you want and zoom in and read it if you care to. But it's basically explaining the vault of heaven, the sky below, the sun, moon, and the stars, the earth, and then Sheol down below. So because we're doing death and afterlife, we're going to particularly talk about Sheol.
Okay. So that was Dr. James Tabor, and that was his consideration of the ancient Hebrew cosmology. And you can see the conception there. We have a flat plane, right? Topographical plane. We've got the rakia, the hard dome-like structure, because we all know that the antecedent to air pressure is containment, right? You can't be next to a stinking vacuum of such high force that to expect to have any air pressure on Earth, no, it would just equalize immediately. We'd all die. So we have to have containment. But no, it's not. You can't sail off to the edge of the Earth. It's got an ice wall basically that surrounds the entire thing. So it's like a swimming pool, big giant swimming pool. But that's James Tabor telling you that the Hebrews believed in the flat Earth, even though he does not believe it. James Tabor does not believe it. And then we'll have Michael Heiser, who also is a heliocentrist, but will tell you that this is what the Hebrews believed. Let's take a look at it.
The Old Testament shares terms and ideas with the ancient Near Eastern pagans. And we talked a little bit about this last week. This should not be a surprise because there are similarities between the conception of how the world that we experience was made that are shared with Israel's neighbors. We see these terms as metaphorical, the terms that I'm going to cover tonight. We look at them, when the Old Testament says something like that the sky is supported by pillars. Oh, that's just metaphorical. It's just poetic. To us it is, and you know why? Because we have a scientific worldview.
That I would agree to an extent, but it's more philosophy. This idea of heliocentrism and the idea that we don't occupy a special place in the cosmos, that's philosophical. That's the Copernican principle. Look it up.
That's why. They didn't. They were serious. No ancient person ever scaled a mountain. Do you realize that? Like the tall mountains? Because it takes oxygen, they freeze, all this kind of special equipment. There's no record that any of them ever did it. Okay, it wasn't until the 15th century that we have, the whole issue resolved of can you sail this way and come out the other, the whole idea about the Earth being a globe and all that kind of stuff, that was debated up into the 15th century. We look at that and go, it's just poetic. It is to us. But what I'm going to say is, again, back to my introduction, if you take it literally, you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. They were serious about it. All these concepts and even some of the terms are part of ancient Near Eastern cosmology. In other words, what I'll show you tonight, the division of the world, what the world looks like in Israelite cosmology, you can find the same descriptions anywhere else. Egypt, Mesopotamia, ancient Syria, the Hittites, whatever. Because this was a common worldview. Now, if we say that Israel knew better through special divine revelation, then we have a problem. Then we have to say that the literature of the pagans, somehow they knew too. Did God speak to them? Where'd they get that information? I really don't want pagan literature to be in any way even looking inspired. Okay, that opens a real can of worms for inspiration. It's just ground we need to stay away from, and for good reason. It's legitimate to stay away from it. If we let the Bible be what it is, though, we can claim it's unique theologically in what it says about God. But if not, then pagan literature is essentially on the same level. And trust me, you don't want to go there. You want it to be unique. Let's get into it here. Exodus 24. Israelite cosmology has 3 tiers. This is the Ten Commandments passage. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. 3 levels. New Testament is the same. Philippians 2:8, verse 10. So that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth. What, like the worms? No. And we're going to see what they were thinking here. Revelation 5, heaven, earth, under the earth. It's a three-tiered cosmology. This is what it would look like. This is a three-tiered cosmology. There's God. We're going to see it in the verses I'll show you that God lives above the vault of heaven, the firmament. And in the firmament you have windows and doors. Then you have the earth. We're going to see verses that talk about the ends of the round, flat earth here. Underneath is Sheol. Sheol can be both the grave, and it can also be the underworld. Okay? It's not quite hell, but it's sort of like hell. We can talk a little bit about it. And then underneath that, we have the great deep. These are all scriptural terms that are on this map. This is what an Israelite, an Egyptian would have had different terms, but the same three-tiered level. Same with the Mesopotamians. Now, theologically, they have dramatically different views of what's going on here. Not just who made it, but what's going on. Views of afterlife, the value of humanity. I mean, it's dramatically different. And I've made the comment before, Genesis is about theological messaging. And there are some dramatic differences in what Israel is saying, the Bible is saying, and anything else. So let's take a look at the parts. Waters above and below the heavens. Genesis 1:6, God said, let there be an expanse. Some translations have firmament. It's rakia in Hebrew. In the midst of the waters. And let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse, the rakia, and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And what was that expanse called? Heaven. The heavens, the sky, Shemayim in Hebrew. So you have here sky. Okay, and you have waters above the sky, and of course you've got waters below down here, but then you have the atmospheric heavens as well. Psalm 148 mentions the waters that are above the heavens. That's after the flood. Did you catch that? Because a lot of people want to say, oh, the waters above, they went away with the flood. See, the firmament was this canopy thing, and it was there, and then the flood, it just went away. And no, it wasn't. According to the psalmist, he's still referring to it. Proverbs 8, when he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. Isn't that interesting? We'll get to that circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. Made firm is amatz in Hebrew. It is the same verb for letting a tree grow firm, hard. Ancient cosmology across the board believed that the sky was this dome over the earth, and it was solid. Kind of like the Truman Show. Okay? They believed that the stars were affixed to it. Some of the stars never moved, but other ones did. And the ones that did, this is why the word stars is attributed to the sons of God and to angels in biblical literature. They believed that the stars were animate beings, that they were really divine beings, and then they'd come to earth as angels, but they lived up there. And those were the ones that moved. Why? Because movement shows what? If something moves, it's alive. Okay? Again, they can't take a rocket and go up and check it out. They believe that this is there's a solid expanse over them. Another passage. Job 37, verse 18. Can you, like him, speaking of Job, drawing the dramatically poor comparison of God and Job, of course we know who's going to win there, but can you, like him, spread out the skies hard, kazak, hard as cast metal, mutsak, as a metal mirror. Mutsak is the same word used in the casting of the laver, the tabernacle where they would wash. It's solid. It's also the same terminology used for flint rock. Again, these passages point to the belief that there's a dome, the sky's a dome, and it's solid. And God lives above it. We live below it. Job 22. But you say, what does God know? Can he judge through the deep darkness? Thick clouds veil him so that he does not see, and he walks on the vault of heaven. That's where God lives. It's his address. You know, and before we think, oh, that's quaint, how cute. We think that, don't we? If a little child would ask you, where does God live? Up there. Is there something wrong with that answer? I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Use it, you know, because there's the sense that God lives off planet. Why? Because he created the earth for us. He doesn't need it. He's independent of it. He transcends it. That's all it is. It's very normal.
Okay. So again, Michael Heisner is not a flat earther. He's a heliocentrist, but he does admit that that is what the Hebrews believed. And I would contend they believed it because that's what was taught to them and revealed to them by God's Holy Spirit. Why else would they believe it? Right? They're just absorbing all the false cosmology of the pagan nations around them. Why would they do that? It's clear, based on the scriptures, that there is a hard dome over the earth, a rakia, a hard metal mirror type structure. When you look at the vision in Ezekiel, and it talks about Jehovah's throne, and it sits above the rakia, and when you look at any one artist's depiction of it, it's almost like this thick layer of glass, right? That is sitting there below God's throne. That's a rakia as well. So they understood what the language was. I mean, they spoke the language, for goodness sakes, and this is their interpretation of it. Don't you think that's worth, at the very least, contemplating and thinking, well, you know what, if that's what they believed, and they spoke the language, they're not like thousands of years removed from it, maybe it's safe to assume that they, understood it and knew what they were talking about. Nobody condemned them. Did Jesus ever condemn them in the Bible for believing in a flat earth, even though we know that's what those civilizations believed? Did he try to correct that mistaken concept or cosmology? No. So, let's get back to air travel, shall we?
Flat Earth using the Pythagorean theorem. Somebody please show me how I'm wrong. So everybody can agree the Pythagorean theorem's a squared plus b squared is c squared, the 3, 4, 5 triangle. But if we overlay a circle on that, the 3, 4, 5 triangle with the radius of 4, the hypotenuse is 5, the radius of 4 from the hypotenuse of 5, and you're left with a remainder of 1. Let's plug in 2,451, 3,963, and the hypotenuse is 4,659. Subtracting out the 3,963, and we get 696. So then we have to, that 696 miles is a drop from flat Earth to curved Earth. The interesting thing at this, 2,451 is the distance in miles from Los Angeles to New York. And if we look at the time from travelmath.com, like 4 hours and 54 minutes at a constant 500 miles an hour. So if we plug those numbers in, to go 696 miles in 4 hours and 54 minutes, you'd have to descend 2.37 miles per minute, or 0.0395 miles per second, 208.56 feet per second. At a cruising altitude less than 8 miles, you have to descend almost 700 miles when you're only flying 7 miles or 8 miles. Is there any commercial pilot, any fighter pilot, anybody that's descending that distance, 208 feet per second, for 4 hours and 54 minutes? Has anybody experienced that? It's ridiculous. It's ludicrous. So why can't we just admit the Earth is flat and get on with our lives? It's about time. The Earth is flat. Prove me wrong. Somebody, please prove me wrong. Use the Pythagorean theorem and prove me wrong. Or if you want to look at, this is the heliocentric Pythagorean theorem. 3 squared plus 4 squared is 4 squared. That's what they want you to believe. Come on, let's wake up. There's so much more to flat Earth than there is believing this nonsense, the heliocentric Earth. So much more. Wake up and enjoy what life could be.
Okay. So 208 feet per second. You would have to compensate for that curvature somehow, right? You can't just fly, you can't just gain altitude and fly straight and level, which is an aviation term, right? Straight and level. It's not typically level. I mean, because they do have about a 2 or 3 degrees pitch that they maintain, which is another proof of the flat Earth we're going to get to next. But just think about it. What do we experience? I've flown from LA to New York. I'm sure you've probably flown. You're an Orange County guy. You've probably flown from LA to New York to go visit Bethel, right? So what do we experience? We experience takeoff. We ascend to cruising altitude, and then we just sit there, fly straight and level, till the time where we have to descend. And again, trying to calculate that descent angle is also based on a flat Earth, because you have to have a horizontal baseline. Horizontal, flat. It doesn't work if it's curved. Right? No, it doesn't. But nobody is compensating 208 feet on average per second. Or per minute, whatever it was. Let's see. What did the calculation here say? 208 feet per second drop for 4 hours and 54 minutes at 500 miles per hour. You're dropping 208 feet per second? That's like free fall, dude. That's probably even faster than free fall. Nobody experiences that. So stupid. Oh, God, I can't believe that I ever believed this nonsense. Now let's look at the pitch data, okay? This is the pitch data of a flight that had an emergency landing, okay? But let's notice what, to see if, because we're talking about pitch, right? Planes have a pitch of about 3 degrees upward to maintain lift and to fly straight and level. Straight and level. Okay? What's level mean, Greg? Yeah, flat. In parallel with the ground. Flat. Level. Okay. That's why it's called sea level, right? Because the ocean is level. It's flat. Right. Good. Okay. Just checking. We agree on these terms, right? Level is flat? Yeah. Okay. Good. Now, let's look at the pitch data from this flight. And what does it tell us?
When they were changing in altitude, going down. The only time they had big pitches up was when they were rising in altitude. But for this flight, we're going to concentrate on just this portion here. So this is 2 hours, from 8:05 to 10:05, right? And if I just go to the next one, you can see that for those 2 hours of that flight, between when it was flying between San Francisco and Honolulu, there was at no point did they change altitude, which is shown here by the altitude pressure here, the black line. It's a completely straight line. I'll zoom in a bit so you can see it. So it's a completely straight line, altitude pressure here. And at no point did they change their pitch. Their pitch was a constant 2-3 degrees, but it is about 3 degrees or something above horizontal. So the pitch line here, this black line below it, I'm just going to get just a second, just so you can see the yellow line. Right? So this here, I'm just going to, so the audience can see clearly, this is 0 degrees. That's horizontal. And the orange is the pitch it had above that. So that's for 2 hours of flight. Now remember, here, I showed 2 hours of flight, right? What it would mean on a globe, and what it would mean if you were traveling via aerodynamics as they actually work in reality. It would mean that you'd end up 126 miles above the altitude you should be at. That's what it would mean, right? But it's shown here in the pitch data, right, that for those 2 hours, because we worked it out at what speed this plane was going at, and the plane happened to be going at almost exactly 500 miles per hour. When you go by the nautical and statute mile and the ground speed and airspeed, we worked it out, and it was going exactly 500 miles an hour, more or less. So for these 2 hours, that plane travelled 1,000 miles, right? 1,000 statute miles. And that would mean, right, that between point A and point B, at no point did it pitch below horizontal. So if the Earth was a globe, what would mean is that the plane would have ended up 126 miles out of altitude. That means it would be 126 miles above the altitude it would have to be at on a globe. But the pitch data shows that the Earth is not a globe, but flat. It proves that the Earth is flat. This is not even an argument, as I said earlier. You can't argue with this. This is just the way things are. This is just a fact. It's just, as I said, green is just green. It's not red, it's not blue, it's not purple, it's green. Same way as red is not green, red is red. Purple is not purple, or purple is not green, purple is purple. Simple as.
So, there you go. Pitch data tells you that the Earth is flat. Okay, now let's get into the Battle of the Beams, Gregor. Have you ever heard of the Battle of the Beams, Gregor? I don't think that you have. Because if you did, you wouldn't be a globe-tard. Now, would you? No, you wouldn't. Let's see. What is the Battle of the Beams? You know about the Battle of the Beams, the Knickbein system that the Germans introduced and used during World War II to bomb the Rolls-Royce factories in England at night? Do you know that belief in a globe, it caused people's deaths and the destruction of these plants? Yeah, it was belief in the globe that caused the English government to not take this threat seriously, because they figured, oh, we're safe. The curvature of the earth will protect us. Oh, yes, the curvature of the earth will protect us from these radar or these radio beams. Oh, yes, we don't have to worry about it. And then they just got hammered. Boom, 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 over and over for like a year. Wondering how on earth they're doing this. It's because the Germans knew that the earth was flat and that these devices would work. Let's take a look and educate ourselves, right? And look at evidence. Evidence, Greg. Something that you say flat earthers don't examine or accept. Okay, well, let's see if you examine and accept the evidence. No, we don't accept the evidence that is given by globetards, because the evidence is nonsense and it's a joke. And it's not mutually exclusive to either a globe or a flat earth, okay? That's why we don't accept it, because it's stupid.
All right, Shane. So back in World War II.
There we go. Why wasn't you coming up, buddy?
All right, Shane. So back in World War II, there was this event called Battle of the Beams. And basically, it was where the Rolls-Royce factory in Derby was producing parts for the war effort. And so in England, after they had retrofitted this factory and turned it into a war production facility, German intelligence became aware of it, and so they decided that they wanted to destroy that factory in order to, hurt their production capabilities. So the only problem is that England had enacted, sufficient air defense systems to be able to shoot down any planes that they saw flying during the day. And there was no way that they were going to be able to fly all the way from Germany to England during the day and drop bombs on this factory. So they decided, well, if we fly at night and we fly, high, like 15, 20,000 feet, we'll be able to, do it without them seeing us, and they also won't be able to get us with radar. So that's what they did. But the only problem is flying at night, in order to be stealthy, they'd have to be flying blind, basically, no lights or anything. And also they wouldn't have any way to reference where they were, because they also would turn the lights off at certain places in England so that they wouldn't be able to track it that way either. And so they needed a navigation system to be able to guide these bomb planes there in order to be able to drop the bombs accurately at night. So the German engineers came up with this idea. They said, hey, why don't we just triangulate the position? What we can do is we can build these radio towers, and what we'll do is we'll send two different beams, and based on, we know where the map says that the location is, they plug in the location, lat, long, all that stuff. They point the beams directly towards Derby, towards the factory. And what we'll do is we'll have the planes fly inside one of the beams. They'll have receivers inside of the plane so that they can tell when they're in it. It'll go off. The receiver will go off and make a noise or whatever, as long as they stay within the beam. So if at any point, it goes off and they stop receiving the signal, they know they've flown out of the beam. So they'll orient themselves in a straight path through the center of the beam, and they'll fly towards Derby. And then the other beam will intersect that beam right when they are over the bombing area, the bombing zone, so that once their receiver receives the second signal and they're receiving both signals simultaneously, they'll know now it's time to drop the bombs. So that's what they did. Now, the only problem with this is that these towers are very, very far away. Cleve is about 333 miles from Derby, and Stolberg Hill in Nordfriesland is about 450 some odd miles away. And so what happened is they made a successful bombing run or two, and British intelligence is like freaking out. They're like, how are they doing this? We don't know. They're trying to figure it out. Well, they did their investigation, and they figured out from a POW they had gotten back that had been held captive, that they had word that the Germans had built radio towers, microwave towers. I guess it wouldn't be microwaves, but radio towers to, target them for bombing. But the problem with it was that based on the curvature of the Earth, there's absolutely no way that these radar beams could possibly have reached the city. And so when they were presented with this information, Winston Churchill's, engineers kind of discarded it as dumb. They're like, that would never work because they're too far away. The curvature of the Earth would block the beams. So they just didn't look into it at first. When you look into the history of it, the bombs continue dropping, they continue getting hammered, and eventually they're like, okay, we're going to be forced to look into it. So they did, and when they did, they found that these towers were in fact real. There's a whole Wikipedia page on this, on Battle of the Beams. But it raises a strange question, because these beams were operating between 30 and 33 megahertz. And measurements taken when they finally found it, because after they investigated it and figured out, where these towers were and what frequencies that they were operating at, they were actually able to intercept the signals with their own planes by searching in that frequency band. They found that the beams, by the time that they reached Derby, were about 400 to 500 yards wide, which is, still a pretty tight bombing zone to drop when you're hitting a factory. That's why they're able to be so accurate. But this is disturbing, because this means that these were, number one, the fact that the planes had to fly in the beams the entire time, right? That's how they maintain their orientation, knowing they're going the right way, shows that it was a line of sight transmission. If you even go to the Wikipedia page, it says that these were more or less line of sight transmissions. So line of sight, that means point to point. That means a straight line. So the planes were flying in a straight line from Stolberg to Derby. And then, or from Cleve to Derby. And then you also account for the fact that they were operating at, 30 megahertz, 33 megahertz, right in that band. That's right at the threshold at which skywave propagation can reliably occur. So even if you said it wasn't line of sight, if you wanted to make that argument, you would have to basically state that they were doing skywaves. Now, if you could go to the next picture, Alan. This shows the distance from Stolberg to Derby. And if you could go to the next one. This shows the distance from Cleve to Derby. So as you can see, 451 and 333 miles. Now, if you use Walter Bislin's Earth curve calculator, you can see exactly how much of a drop there would be. This is the one from Stolberg Hill. So as you can see up there, accounting for standard refraction and everything, I'm not necessarily sure that you would even need that because of, these RF frequencies, more like a straight line, right? But it just, giving them the most benefit of the doubt possible, you would have about 112,000 feet of drop. And if the plane that in question was flying at, at the maximum altitude back then of 25,000 feet, total operational maximum back then there would be 96,000 feet of hidden height. Okay, so by the time this beam went from Stolberg Hill and reached Derby, it would be 96,000 feet in the air. Okay, this creates multiple problems. Number one, let's presume that you want to appeal to, skywave bouncing. Under perfect conditions, something right above 30 megahertz can still be skywave reflected off the ionosphere. So someone might say, oh, that must have been what they were doing. This must have been what was at work in this situation in order for the planes to intercept the beams once they were over Derby. Well, there's a problem with this explanation. See, skywave propagation, also known as bouncing or skipping, it does not occur in perfect straight lines or at perfect angles. It will always end up reflecting, the ionosphere will always end up reflecting the wave it receives at some level of cant, some angle of cant. There will be some small angle at the very least. And that angle is going to be based on, whatever the atmospheric conditions of that day are and a bunch of other variables. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be a parallel, just perfect straight line reflection. Now, this change in angle, regardless of how large or small, would have caused a shift in the point at which the two beams being used would have intersected, meaning that they wouldn't have intersected at the point they were supposed to intersect, right over the factory. They would have intersected somewhere off to the left or off to the right. An angle change of only 1 degree from the beam shot from Stolberg Hill or Cleve would have shifted the point of intersection of the beams by many kilometers. Another problem with the idea that they were shooting skywaves is the fact that when people actually do shoot skywaves, right, they aim the projecting equipment directly towards the sky. But that's not what they did. They shot the beams directly towards the target because the planes were actively flying inside the beams the entire time that they were flying from Germany to Derby. The only reason the beams could have ever eventually hit the ionosphere in the first place would have been because as you travel a further distance, the beams would have naturally trailed off towards the sky as the Earth curved away from the beams underneath. But when you look at these images, the Earth curve calculator, you can see that variable right there labeled drop at the top and, the hidden height. You can see the altitude the beams would have been at when they reached Derby. You can see that when we look at these altitudes, you got the altitude of the beam being about 96,000 plus feet. Now that is far, far below the ionosphere. That's far short of the ionosphere. Okay, you're not even getting close to the ionosphere to be able to bounce down in the first place. but still far, far, far above the altitude that the planes flew at, which means that if the plane's at 25,000 feet and the signal's up in the sky at 96,000 feet, you're not receiving that signal. This is why, it's historically documented and known that these were line of sight transmissions. The planes had to be flying inside the beams the entire time, and then the other beam, when they got there, would have hit them, and they would have gotten a double signal and known when to drop. So in conclusion, by the time that these beams traveled from Germany and reached Derby on a globe, if the Earth was a globe, the beams would have been far too high above the planes for the planes to even be able to receive the signal, but they would have been far too low below the ionosphere in order to experience any sort of a skip or bounce or skywave propagation, reflection. And even if you just ignore all that and you just use brute force logic and assume that somehow a skywave bounce did happen, that bounce would have caused an angle change, which would have defeated the whole point of this accuracy of the system, because it wouldn't have ended up in the same position. It would have been off by kilometers. It would have defeated the whole point. And we know historically this system factually worked to factually perform precision strikes on the Rolls-Royce factory. Thus, the conclusion is that the Earth cannot possibly be a globe of 3959 miles in radius.
And something that he didn't necessarily get too much into or delve too much in there. Look at the skip zones. You're not receiving signal in those skip zones. But these planes, they had to be inside of that beam continuously from the beginning of their flight to the end, and so that they could also return back, right? They can't have skip zones. It has to be one coherent beam the entire way. And notice, if they drift off to the left, they get like a beep, beep, beep. If they drift that way, they know they're off to the left, and they have to compensate to get back into the middle of the beam. If they get off to the right, it's beep, 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 right? And then they know they're off to the right. They got to compensate and get back to the beam, because then you have just one solid beep, one solid signal. One solid, coherent signal from the beginning to the end and back again. That is not possible on a curved Earth. And even the British government didn't think it was possible, because they thought, well, the curvature of the Earth will block that radar signal. There's nothing going to, we don't have anything to worry about it. Until they got hit like over a year of bombing raids, and then they finally decided to take it seriously. So heliocentrism and globetardism gets people killed. And if you flew a plane like the Earth had a radius of 3959, you would be crashing into the Earth, killing everybody. So, yeah, I mean, go ahead. You can continue to block me from commenting on your channel, and you can continue to pretend that flat earthers don't accept evidence. But I think the time has come, Gregor, that I need to take your ball away from you. I need to pop it. I need to pop it and make it a pancake. Because that is more in line with reality of where we live. It's a topographical plane, Gregor. It ain't a ball. You don't get to play with your ball anymore, Gregor. We living on a pancake. That's what you got to understand. Anyways, no hard feelings for blocking me and not answering my questions and ignoring me like I don't exist, and really not living up to the golden rule, I would say, in that particular case, in my particular case. But hopefully I gave you some food for thought. But the chances of you responding to this are probably nil. Anyways, yeah. Flat earthers. Actually, I find a lot of them very, very educated, highly educated, mathematicians, scientists, physicists, all sorts of different people, pilots, people that are, have sailed even, all throughout the earth. They come from every background and every educational level. So to say and make ignorant statements like flat earthers don't accept evidence is just, it seems at this point, it seems to be more of projecting on your part than anything else. But I don't know. I mean, continue your good work with the Trinity. But your accusations against flat earthers and saying how stupid we are and all this, it's just, it's a bunch of hot air.